Hi and welcome to day 3 of Thomann Synth Reactor. I am joined on the couch by none other than Gaz Williams.
Hello.
And tell us a little bit about yourself, Gaz.
Well, yes. I'm a kind of music technologist and bass player. I do a lot of stuff with Sonic State, do like reviews of various bits and bobs. I've been invited here very kindly to just come and basically have nutty times, which has been amazing. Gotta say,
absolutely.
It's been so much fun. Some of the things that I've been part of are...
So these videos will be out.
Yeah, we'll see over the next few weeks. A lot of content will be coming. I've got a channel actually called Gaz Williams.
So you're telling the viewers at home that your channel is named Gaz Williams. So you've taken that name as your own.
I have.
So you've named yourself after your channel.
I know, it's weird it was that way
Not
around.
many people do that,
I know,
but I'm glad that you've taken that step. Maybe others will follow.
Yeah, well, but I mean, my channel's a bit of a dustbin for sort of the crap that I get up to. I'm not really like a complete sort of channel sort of dude like some of the others. So because I do a lot of stuff on Sonic State. But I think I'm quite inspired to maybe sort of up my game a little bit. I've got no talent when it comes to sort of filmmaking, you see, and so my channel, the quality, like everyone else's channels are really good. Mine is just like bargain basement. So I think I need to kind of up the game a little bit.
And we have Mark Doty with us.
Hi.
As well, you have to introduce yourself and your channel, perhaps?
I have the channel Automatic Gainsay, which I'll very soon be changing the name of to Gaz Williams.
And will your name follow?
No, just his. I will dress like him. I'm growing my hair out, so that will happen. But no, I'm a synth educator and synth-related person, and I worked as a synth historian. I work at Buchla.
That's something. That's something pretty special.
And I'm Jason Jervis. My channel, GetJervis, is a fledgling of a channel, a very small, 7 months in, but loving every minute of it, with a almost lifetime worth of experience. So,
what kind of experience?
Well,
Going to the bathroom.
Let's leave that. Before we start on our topic, please, we do encourage questions. So, if you've had any thoughts about today's topic, which I will reveal shortly, please don't feel. Please add them, and we will try to answer as many as possible. So, today's theme is the history. Drum roll, please. Of the synthesizer.
Oh, big topic.
Chat, boys.
Just as well we've got like the foremost expert on the topic.
And Mark's wearing a wonderful T-shirt. Would you like to talk about your T-shirt first?
Okay.
Let's zoom in on that.
So what most people do not know is that Harold Bode, people constantly talk about Bob Moog and Don Buchla, both people who are wonderful, who I have essentially worked for both of them. But when you talk about the origin of synthesis, it wasn't when those two guys started it. I'm trying to think of the best way to say it. Okay, a nice way to say this. Bob and Don were influenced by an article written in 1961 from the AES convention, written by Mr. Harold Bode. Harold Bode, in 1960, invented a modular analog synthesizing device, voltage controlled. It was tube-based, but it was voltage controlled. So the voltage controlled synthesizer was literally created by Harold Bode, and his was initially called a synthesizer, unlike that of Bob Moog, who didn't call his until 1967, and Don, who never wanted to have his called that at all. So I wore this specifically to Synth Reactor to celebrate Harold Bode, who incidentally also invented the polyphonic synthesizer in 1937.
Wow.
37. So what year were you talking about though with that? This 1961 as the subtractive?
Well, in 1961, Harold Bode created a voltage-controlled modular synthesizer. It was all in one case, And it didn't have oscillators, which is the thing that Bob and Don sort of brought to the deal important. But it did have filters and envelopes and VCAs and modularity, and it used tape as, as the oscillator. So you could have taped, you know, a tone.
And like a permanent, like a loop, like a just.
Excellent.
So that's what happened in 1960, and he wrote an article for the 1961 AES convention about what he had done.
So
that's amazing.
Can I ask you a question then? Is it Conlon Nancarrow? Was he the creator of the? What did he create?
Thanks, Gaz. I've never heard that name.
I think you've just made that guy up to sound important and like you're talking the history of.
What was?
There's the
motorized wheelchair.
I'm going to get this wrong. It's the French piano harpsichord.
On
Martineau, yeah.
That's well, I think we've got to go
28.
back. We've got to go back a little bit.
That's even.
When was the theremin? When was the theremin?
Well, there's some contention, but basically it was 1920. Albert Glinsky, who wrote the definitive theremin biography, told me personally that 1920 was a safe bet to say. The concept developed before that when Leon Theremin was working on basically a burglar alarm,
right?
A capacitive burglar alarm,
I think,
and it set off a tone when the capacitive field was interfered with a human body, and he was just like, wait a minute, if this can do one tone, maybe the voltage of it can do a tone that changes. If the burglar's getting closer, it'll go higher.
So the theremin. How cool
that's
is that?
amazing.
How cool
Let's
is that?
just rewind further back than the theremin. In terms of electricity, Thaddeus Cahill, not Conlon Nancarrow, it's Thaddeus Cahill.
Okay.
That's who I was thinking of. So we have to go. Was that the telharmonium? No,
yes.
That was. So that is. Does that have the claim to be the first electric? Or would you say?
It depends on how you're categorizing, because a lot of people talk about the singing arc, and I always forget the name of the fellow who came up with that, because I don't use it in my lectures, because it was an electronic instrument, of which there were several in the late 19th century. And because it was an electronic instrument, to me is very fascinating. Electronic instruments are wonderful, but it wasn't a synthesizer per se. It wasn't designed for the purpose of generating, authoring sound.
Nice.
Whereas, the telharmonium was specifically designed to author timbre through additive synthesis. So I often say that the telharmonium really was the first thing. Helmholtz, the famous scientist, was the one who sort of started to take the concept of harmonics being stacked, the concept of what we would later call additive synthesis, apply it to sound, and Thaddeus Cahill ran with that.
I suppose if we backed up even further to the pipe organ.
Pipe organ?
Because that's essentially additive synthesis.
Sine waves.
Yeah, mixing. It's a sense of...
It's complex additive synthesis.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm just trying to get like some sort of really big historical kind of perspective here. So, when was the first pipe organ? I mean, this is maybe outside
I don't know. I am not an acoustic synthesizer.
Yeah, I mean, like, it was around in the time of Bach, wasn't it? So...
I would say there was a Roman water-operated organ.
Apparently they have one in Thomann.
There was a Roman water-operated organ. I don't remember the name of it or when it was, but the Romans had some sort of weird water-operated.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, the reason why I was just saying that though, because I mean, the definition of a synthesizer doesn't necessarily define the need for electricity. So if you are using pipes
and adding tones
together,
to create a new timbre,
would that be the beginning of synthesis?
Here's the thing, though: synthesizer is a misleading title, because what people say is, okay, synthesize means to put things together to create an outcome, and if you think of it that way, literally almost everything we do to make sound is a synthesizer.
Right.
So then you have to dial it back and go, what defines why did the term come about?
Right.
And the term didn't come about until the RCA Mark II, which was the Mark I was invented in 1955 or 1956, and then the Mark II was 1957, and that was the first implementation of the term synthesizer,
Right.
specifically to describe a device that with which you use the components of sound, synthesize them together for a specific sound and performance outcome. And so then it becomes like, well, okay, if that's where the term was coined to describe this device, things that have the characteristics of that device with the intent of that device should probably define what synthesizer meant and can mean. Whereas like a pipe organ certainly was designed to create sounds, and certainly by mixing sounds you can create new sounds.
And
but they labeled all of those sounds traditional instruments.
Yes, of course.
Because they're like, well, probably because there wasn't a what do you call a square wave? Like, I guess this sounds like a clarinet. Okay, this is the clarinet.
Right.
Yes,
But it wasn't designed to specifically author sounds that had never been heard before, which was an important component of why the synthesizer in the 50s was created, to jump on the bandwagon of electronic music, which was a burgeoning concept right in the 50s. Composers wanted to create new music with new instruments.
That's possibly a good question then, is who was the first recorded musician to record purely electronic sound? Because I mean, obviously Raymond Scott's recordings of this, I think he probably started in the end of the 40s with his electronic sounds, didn't he? But I mean, and Musique Concrète is what? That
was 1948, Pierre Schaeffer.
Okay. So I mean, I know this is slightly veering off topic, but I guess...
But it is and it isn't, because of course without the need for the instrument, why would there be an instrument? So you want to create... how does the synthesizer become a thing if there's no need for it?
So those things that you'd attach to the bottom of a piano, a clavioline or... What years are we looking at those things for?
Those were in the 40s. The Hammond did one, the Solovox. I think those were in the late 40s.
Oh, and of course the Nova-chord as well. We need to kind of...
And Bode only beat Hammond by a year.
Fantastic.
Right, so we're going So let's just contextualize. We talked about the polyphonic synth then, 1937.
Yeah.
The Nova-chord was 1938 then.
It was 1938. Yeah.
So that was Hammond's. So we associate Hammond with the Hammond organ.
Right.
And what was the Nova-chord's kind of intended use? Was it like cinema or something?
I have an original Nova-chord pamphlet, and it was intent on being used. They said you can create sounds that no one has ever heard before.
Yeah.
These are new sounds that you can compose with. And so they really kind of were jumping on this electronic instrument bandwagon, like, hey, you can do whatever you imagine with this. Now they did, when in the patch manual, they have a patch manual, they did name everything like traditional instruments, which kind of goes against what they said in the pamphlet, but the pamphlet's all about like, this is a brave new world and you're ready to go with this instrument.
Right. Yeah.
So that's why I'm willing to call it a synthesizer, because Lawrence Hammond and Charles Williams and John Hannert was a visionary in creating new electronic instruments, and they were really aimed in that direction, despite the fact that they put this futuristic instrument in a piano case with a traditional bench, and it was originally designed with velocity, so it would have been amazing, but they're like, oh, that's too expensive.
Far ahead.
So they gave it an organ pedal, which doomed it forever to be considered an organ.
Yeah, of course. And obviously the history of Hammond then is obviously synonymous with
so
that.
synonymous.
I was actually at the Hammond factory last year. A friend of mine who's an organ...
Legend.
Organ legend. No, well, he's an organ legend, but his tech has actually got his Hammond workshop, where he services, repairs, refurbishes Hammonds, Leslies, the benches, the bass pedals. He has got an enormous stock. So yeah, Paul's places. He gave us a tour, and there's some in Chicago.
In Chicago.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. So he's got.
Is that where Hammond are from then? Chicago.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, that's a very special place. And I had a little tour of that. It's dusty, some parts that are the loading dock, which probably hadn't been used since the factory closed down. So very special. Yeah, it's great stuff.
So so in a way, part of our discussion so far has almost been the semantics or the actual definition of the name, and but like just fast forwarding then back or coming up to the 1960s again, and the amazing things that happened in the 1960s, because obviously at the end of the 1960s, and we're going to backtrack a moment, it's just...
Yeah, no, that's fine. This is all about the history. If you just joined us now and you are one of the small amount of followers that are watching live on TV now, yes, we're talking about the history of synthesizers.
Right. So maybe something that might be quite an interesting sort of thing to look at is... what year did the Minimoog go on sale? 1970 or...
It was finished in 70, and Dave Van Koevering started selling them in early 71 or so.
Excellent. Okay, so I was only merely mentioning that just to act as like a chapter to try to get to.
So that's the point where it becomes. It's expensive, but a portable, affordable single unit
that you could
actually take on tour, pop on top of your Rhodes or your Hammond, and play in a band scenario that most people can relate to.
And unquestionably called a synthesizer.
Unquestionably.
Right. So then, okay, let's try and work out how we can get to the launch of the Minimoog and what happened across the 1960s.
I actually know that story. So, the Moog company was doing some interesting things. It was kind of moving forward, and a lot of universities and colleges were purchasing modular systems. And then in 1968, Wendy Carlos released Switched on Bach, which was like the most incredible timbral thing that ever happened. Wow, that was a whoa.
Say that again.
Don't quote me on that. Is this recording? No. But no, it was amazing, and people heard Switched on Bach, and they said, "Hey, I want to play music that sounds like that."
Absolutely.
Which is sad because synthesis is supposed to be about what you envision, not like it's not a trombone.
Yeah.
Hey, that trombone player is really good. Let's get him in the band. Which is basically what happened with popular music when they heard the synthesizer in Switched on Bach. They're like, I want rock with that sound.
Yeah, for sure.
And so it had been going on at Moog Music that people were always people in the company, also musicians, were saying, "Hey, I really want something that's portable that I can just play." And Bob he wanted to appeal to the academics because they were the ones with the money, and also he wanted a level of art that was higher than lowly rock musicians like Gaz and I. So he resisted this urge to create a smaller synthesizer. They eventually did in 1968 with the synthesizer 10. It was small. It is very similar to what became the Model 15 later on. It was put together by Gene Zunchak, who was an engineer that worked for Moog.
That's a cool surname, isn't it?
It is. But Bob and Gene didn't get along very well, and eventually Gene parted ways. But Gene, while there, had been constantly telling Bob, you need to make a portable synthesizer. Do a portable synthesizer. So Gene went on, and the company went on, but the people in the company were all basically saying, too, we really need to... we need to have a portable synthesizer so that we could save the company. Because weirdly, sales went massively up just after Switched on Bach.
Yeah.
And then they tanked. Because everyone who could afford a expensive modular had one. And no one else could afford them,
What kind of price would you pay for the full modular, for the full Moog modular at that point in time?
I don't remember the specific prices.
Right. But we're looking at the price of a house, so price of a house.
It was certainly the price of a house back then.
Right. Okay.
And so basically, Moog was having a lot of trouble.
Sure.
RA Moog was having a lot of trouble. And the engineers, while Bob was away in Europe trying to generate interest and possibly making connections with other companies like EMS, people back at home were like, we're just gonna start building this thing, And so Bill Hemsath basically took a modular and smashed it into a little keyboard and was like, how about this? And then they kept working on it. Then Bob came home and he was
What have you
irritated.
done?
Like everyone's all
What have you
like,
done?
Bob didn't want them to make the Minimoog, and he didn't. But then he did get on board with it once the whole thing came together. And then Bob and a number of other people like Jim Scott and Bill Hemsath and et cetera worked to create this device.
So as that particular story was going on, then you touched on EMS. Then this is like Britain's kind of contribution to the development of synthesizers.
Right.
When did they launch the VCS3? Because the VCS3 was their first product, was it? Or
I think it was 69.
69. Obviously, very different format, no keyboards. This kind of
matrix pin board, interesting coloured knobs. I mean, it's beautiful, isn't it? Absolutely beautiful.
Oh yeah, it's an object of absolute sort of adoration. Wonderful thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
I borrowed one once for a bit from Paul Sandra, the great synth player, and I was utterly baffled with it, and loved it. I talked with, actually no, I heard about Brian Eno's relationship with it was quite interesting with the VCS3.
Yeah, because it was all over the early Roxy Music stuff, absolutely, yeah.
It wasn't that he particularly knew what he was doing,
Well,
and he
I
would
think
just sort of like
yeah.
go lucky dip. With
But I suppose you're talking about an instrument that really is at a time when it's in its infancy. So why should he know?
Okay.
Why should anybody have taken this synthesizer that has been created out of ideas and concepts that were alien to people and know exactly what it's about?
So I suppose then, in 1969, what could you buy that is a synthesizer in 1969? And would we call a Mellotron a synthesizer? Not really, but
I would put my foot down on that one and say absolutely not.
Right.
I mean,
It's a glorified tape player.
It is a crazy tape player.
right.
But it's interesting. It's really its own instrument.
Yeah.
True. But I suppose then, I mean, like today, I mean, that this enormous shop that we're in is testament to it. Just how many thousands of products are available to the musician. But the musician's choice in 1969, for instance, what was on the table? So we've got the Moog modular, which would that be the Model 15? What was on sale in 69?
In 69, they had moved on to like the 3P and the 3C. In the Moog realm, there was the Synthesizer 10 was, like I said, available in 1968. So the whole RA Moog line was available in 1969. Don Buchla's
I was just going to come to Buchla's
stuff was all available, like the 100, all of his 100 series stuff was available in 1969.
So when did Don come? When was his first product, and when?
How does that fit into the timeline?
Synthesizer.
No, he did not. I think he was affected very negatively by, essentially, this is not what he would say, but when rock musicians started playing the synthesizer as a keyboard instrument. And Don's vision for this electronic music studio was like, okay, it's not an organ. It's not this is an electronic music tool, traditional electronic music that had been around since the 1950s. This is a tool for creating that in the grand scheme of using electrons to create your own timbres and your own performance and style.
Because there was that musical movement, really, wasn't there? Like that was all about absolute pure electronic music, and we saw this in the 1950s, and we'll probably. We were chatting. Of course.
We have got a comment here from the Fish Dog saying stylophone 1968. Is that right? 68.
I have
so there you go.
An unfinished documentary about the history of the stylophone where Ben Jervis told me all of the stuff, and I haven't revisited it. So yeah.
So that slots in. That's a kind of an interesting time then. Yeah. I mean, that's macro.
I would say though that the stylophone was never until it became a synthesizer. Was really an electronic instrument.
Yes. Yeah.
So. Raymond Scott, we've been talking about. Raymond Scott was a band leader of a jazz band during the 1930s and a composer of some considerable skill. he made some incredible music that ended up getting used in lots of cartoons. Was it Looney Tunes cartoons?
Yeah, Warner Brothers.
Warner Brothers.
Fantastic.
And his music, which he was a serious composer, got associated with it being cartoon music.
Oh no!
Right.
And of course, its basis is in Puse.
Well, no, so he was really, so he really, I mean, he probably made lots of money because he did clearly need lots of
very wealthy.
very wealthy, but withdrew from society and cocooned himself into this most incredible, what was it, Manhattan Research? What was the name of his studio? Wow. The most astonishing, like it looks like a set from a 1950s sci-fi film. You can't believe that these are all musical generating, and of course they were great. He was a great friend with Bob Moog.
Oh, very much so. Yeah.
Okay. So I was really curious about, and you can hear some terrific, maybe Raymond Scott's most classic electronic period is probably actually the early 60s, I think. He did that album, was it 1962, Soothing Sounds for Baby, which would probably instill a sort of deep paranoid fear, probably the paranoid fear that he had. Program him into the baby. I wonder how many babies have grown up with severe anxiety.
Who was a victim of Soothing Sounds for Baby?
Please write in the comments below, and
if you've been affected by any of the
topics discussed tonight. But I think we're gonna round it off. So did we get to 19?
Well, I mean,
we kind of almost.
Well, I suppose like the Minimoog.
Fast track us to the
Minimoog entering the market, I suppose, is like a watershed moment, really, of all of this invention
bubbling
and different ideas,
pioneering,
finally kind of coalescing into what we can recognise today as, like, in maybe most people's minds, a synthesizer.
I often wanted to write an article which was like, the Minimoog was the end of synthesis.
Because
because it took a concept that was a compositional style and visualization that had been growing for 70 years, and twisted it down into a traditional music performance
and product.
Brought it back into
that's what it is.
Brought it back into Western 12, chromatic Western music.
It's just a traditional instrument with a new timbre. And I mean, certainly you'll want to argue with me saying like, but really, conceptually, after that, that's what killed the modulars. They're like, okay, no one wants to do this anymore. And
so that whole music was like based on like a different set of notes, because the notes weren't so quantified into regular.
It was supposed to, you were free to create your own note types and values and the way that they were arranged and how they were performed. Electronic music was breaking the chains of the 19th century and allowing the composer to really, envision what they wanted to create, which usually was unlistenable garbage. But these are such bad quotes. I'm so sorry.
So these things must not be put on bumper stickers, ever.
No, I love traditional electronic music,
of
but
course.
It was inaccessible to the average of people.
Yes, yeah.
Whereas the Minimoog said, hey, look, the synthesizer will work for the average of people.
And let's face it, Hugo Montenegro was the godfather of all electronic music.
He was one of them.
There's comedy in there. Right, well, thank you very much for your time and for your wisdom, both of you. It's been an absolute pleasure being on the couch discussing synthesis. Stay around, look out for TSR stuff.
TSR 19.
TSR 19.
Thomann Synth Reactor.
Thomann Synth Reactor. Enjoy.
Yeah.